The fog clung to the streets like a living thing, thick and suffocating, swallowing the glow of the streetlights. Every step the man took echoed back at him, too loud in the eerie silence. He had taken this shortcut countless times, but tonight it felt different, as if the familiar path had been twisted just slightly out of reach. A chill crawled up his spine, and he pulled his coat tighter, brushing his hands against the damp fabric. A soft, strange glow flickered ahead. At first, he thought it was a lamp left on in a yard, but the light hovered in the fog like it had no source, pulsing softly. He slowed, curiosity warring with a sudden unease. The shadows around him seemed to stretch unnaturally, dancing at the edge of his vision. A distant metallic clank made him freeze, and he swore he heard footsteps echoing his own, though the street was empty. "Who's there?" he called, voice trembling, trying to convince himself he was imagining things. Silence answered. He took another step, squinting into the fog, and then he saw it, a bus stop that shouldn't exist. Its peeling paint was dimly illuminated by the unearthly glow, and the fog swirled around it like it was breathing. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but it didn't disappear. Something about it was wrong. It didn't belong to this neighborhood this time, or even this world. He glanced down the empty street. The familiar buildings were gone, swallowed entirely by the grey mist. His heart beat faster, each pulse echoing in his ears. Rational thoughts scrambled for dominance. Maybe someone left a lamp on, he whispered, more to calm himself than to explain the impossible. But the air was too cold, too still, and the glow seemed to thrum beneath his skin. A low rumble grew distant at first, then closer, vibrating through the ground beneath his shoes. Headlights pierced the fog, cutting long, sharp lines across the deserted road. A bus emerged, silent except for the soft hiss of its doors opening, as if inviting him. He hesitated, every instinct screaming to turn and run, yet he found himself rooted, staring at the empty bench beneath the glow. A voice, or something like a voice, whispered through the fog, soft and deliberate, "Come." His pulse skipped. The rational part of his mind argued it was the wind, a trick of sound in the mist. But another part, a deeper, primal part, shivered, knowing this was no ordinary street, no ordinary night. He took one cautious step forward. The fog seemed to curl around him, thicker now, swallowing the street behind him as if erasing any chance of retreat. The bus waited patiently, doors open, its interior shadowed and impossible. And then, with a quiet inevitability, the man realized he had no choice but to move toward it. Somewhere deep in the fog, the streets of the familiar world were already gone. The man stepped closer to the bus stop, each footfall swallowed by the thick, clammy fog. The glow from the shelter bathed his face in a pale, unnatural light, revealing the peeling paint and warped wood, details that shouldn't belong on a bus stop in his city. He reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the bench, and a shiver ran down his spine. The air smelled faintly of rust and damp earth, though the street had been cleaned just moments ago. Shadows flickered inside the small shelter, but there was no one there. Nothing human. He swallowed hard, heart hammering. This doesn't make sense, he whispered, voice cracking. The fog seemed to tighten around him, pressing against his chest. He glanced back down the empty street, but it was gone, swallowed entirely by grey. His instincts screamed to turn, to run, but his legs felt heavy, frozen as if the mist itself weighed them down. A sound, soft and almost musical, came from within the shelter, a low hum that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. The man took a step back, glancing around desperately. Each streetlight in the surrounding blocks seemed to flicker and die, leaving him in a pool of ghostly luminescence. The glow from the bus stop pulsed again, brighter this time, like a heartbeat. His eyes widened as he noticed the posters on the shelter walls were faded and torn, showing dates from decades ago. Advertisements for events he had never heard of, people he didn't recognize. A sudden movement caught his eye, a figure just a shape, darted behind the bench. His pulse raced. "Hello?" He called out louder this time, but no response came. Only the fog answered, thick and silent, curling around his feet like liquid. He realized the air felt colder here, colder than the night outside, and a creeping dread began to squeeze his chest. Every rational thought was slipping through his fingers, replaced by a gnawing, primal fear. Then, from the distance, a deep rumble began, soft at first, like the growl of some enormous creature beneath the earth. It grew steadily, vibrating through his bones until it became impossible to ignore. Headlights split the fog in the distance, and he saw the outline of a bus, impossibly large, gliding toward him. The doors opened with a slow, mechanical hiss, empty seats glowing faintly within. The man's stomach churned, the fog inside the shelter swirled as if alive, and the air carried a whisper so soft it almost sounded like a voice calling his name. "Maybe I should just walk away," he muttered, shaking his head, trying to convince himself. But the pull was irresistible, a magnetic force urging him toward the glowing interior of the bus. The vehicle stopped completely, engine silent, doors open like a Moor waiting. He took a trembling step forward. The fog swirled more tightly around him, erasing the path behind him, as if the world he knew had already vanished. His chest tightened. Somewhere in the mist, beyond the glow, something waited, and it was patient. The man's hand hovered over the first step of the bus, heart racing, and he felt the first cold whisper of dread brush against his mind. The doors seemed to breathe. They were waiting for him. He hesitated on the first step of the bus, the fog curling around his ankles like icy fingers. The interior was dimly lit, a sickly yellow glow that made everything feel unreal. The seats were lined with passengers, perfectly still, but the moment he looked closer, his stomach sank. They had no faces, not blurred, not shadowed, completely blank. Smooth surfaces where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. His throat went dry. What is this?" he whispered, voice cracking. A cold wind swept through the aisle, though the doors were closed, and the hum of the bus seemed to resonate inside his chest. He wanted to step back, wanted to flee, but his feet felt glued to the floor. The faceless passengers didn't move, yet he could feel their attention, a silent, oppressive awareness that pinned him in place. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's a prank, someone in masks. His own words sounded hollow, absurd even, as the shape in the driver's seat remained still, head tilted slightly, staring straight ahead as if the man didn't exist. The whispering hum grew louder, threading into the sound of his heartbeat until he couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. A faceless figure raised a hand, not aggressively, not threatening, but deliberate, and pointed toward an empty seat. He swallowed, mind screaming at him to turn back, to leave, but the magnetic pull of the bus seemed stronger than his will. Every rational thought dissolved in the haze of panic. I don't think I should," he stammered, voice shaking. The whisper returned, softer, almost melodic. "Come." His pulse spiked, sweat slicking his palms. He felt lightheaded, vertigo pulling at him as if the floor itself had shifted. The fog inside the bus swirled unnaturally, wrapping around the empty seats, making them seem farther apart, longer, impossible. The walls of the bus stretched and warped, and he realized with growing horror that he didn't recognize the space anymore. He took a step toward the aisle, every nerve on fire. The faceless passengers didn't blink, didn't speak, but he felt them leaning ever so slightly toward him, collectively, in a silent, patient pressure. The driver's head twitched subtly, almost acknowledging his presence, yet still staring forward. He wanted to scream, to shake them, but the sound caught in his throat. A distant sound, like the click of shoes on concrete, echoed from somewhere at the back of the bus. He turned sharply, heart hammering, but the shadows there were thick, undisturbed. The whisper came again, barely audible. "Sit." He froze. Every instinct screamed to resist, yet he stepped forward compelled, drawn down the aisle. The fog thickened behind him, erasing the doorway, the street, everything familiar. The bus seemed alive now, exhaling softly, humming, as if it had been waiting for him all along. And when he reached the halfway point, a new, terrifying realization struck him. There was no turning back. The faceless eyes, though they had none, were on him, patient, eternal, and the bus was moving, gliding silently into a world that no longer belonged to him. The bus lurched forward without a sound, gliding over a road swallowed by endless grey fog. The man's hands gripped the edge of the seat as a cold, unnatural wind swept through the aisle. The faceless passengers sat motionless, yet he could feel their attention like a weight pressing against his chest. Every instinct screamed to run, to escape, but the doors wouldn't budge. No handle, no latch, nothing. The outside world had vanished, swallowed entirely by the dense mist. He staggered down the aisle, heart hammering, eyes darting at the blank faces surrounding him. The seats seemed impossibly long, stretching farther than they should, and the shadows between them writhed as if alive. He tried to speak, voice shaking. "Let me off, please, someone." His words dissolved into the hum of the bus, swallowed by the oppressive silence. A soft whisper curled through the air, barely audible, threading into the rhythm of his heartbeat. "You belong." It wasn't any single voice, yet it carried the weight of every faceless passenger. The man's knees weakened, sweat pouring down his temples. He stumbled into a seat near the middle, gripping it as if it were the only tether to reality. The fog pressed closer, seeping through the windows, curling around him like a living thing. He tried to recall the streets he had walked, the shortcut he had taken, anything familiar, but memory failed him. Each turn of the bus revealed the same fog, the same grey nothingness. The faceless passengers remained still, watching, patient. Occasionally, one would tilt its head slightly, a gesture that set his nerves screaming. He realized with a cold certainty that the bus had no destination he could recognize. No home, no street, no escape. Panic clawed at him, chest tight, hands trembling. I can't stay here," he whispered, voice barely audible over the internal hum of fear. But the bus seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, moving faster, yet silently, as if aware of his terror and feeding off it. He clenched his eyes shut, willing himself to wake, to find the street again, to escape the nightmare. When he dared to open them, the faceless passengers had shifted imperceptibly, closer, their blank, smooth faces now uncomfortably near. He felt their presence pressing from every side, a suffocating, patient inevitability. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, a chorus of soft insistence that he could not resist. The realization hit him fully, freezing every muscle in his body. There was no turning back. The bus would not stop. The street behind him had ceased to exist. The world outside was gone. He was trapped, carried endlessly into the grey unknown, a solitary soul surrounded by faceless watchers. And as the fog thickened, swallowing the windows, the man understood that whatever this was, it had always been waiting. The bus glided forward, silent, eternal, and the faceless passengers remained, patient and unblinking. Outside, the world had vanished. Inside, hope had vanished too. He was gone. The bus continued, into the endless grey, and the man's fate was sealed, unresolved, a whisper lost in the fog. The night had a strange stillness to it. The wind outside the old countryside house had stopped, leaving behind a silence so deep that even their breathing seemed too loud. Emma lay awake beside Daniel, staring at the cracked ceiling. That's when she heard it again, a faint, deliberate scratching under the bed. At first, she thought it might be a mouse. But the sound wasn't random. It was slow, steady, like nails dragging over wood. She froze, holding her breath. The sound stopped, then came again, closer this time. Her hand reached for Daniel's arm. "Danny, did you hear that?" she whispered. He stirred, half asleep, "It's an old house, Em. Wood settles. Go back to sleep." But Emma couldn't. The scratching grew softer, slower, almost teasing. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. She leaned over the edge of the bed and peered into the darkness below. Nothing. Just the gap beneath the floorboards, black as a void. "Emma." Morning brought sunlight and the smell of dust. Daniel laughed it off, joking about country rats. They spent the day unpacking, laughter in the kitchen, the echo of footsteps on wood. But when night came again, the silence returned. Emma lay in bed, trying to stay calm. Then she heard it, the scratching, louder this time. It was right beneath her side of the bed. She sat up sharply, her throat dry. The sound stopped the moment she moved. "Daniel, it's happening again," she whispered. Daniel groaned, pulling the blanket over his head. "You're overthinking it. It's nothing." But it didn't feel like nothing. She pressed her ear to the cold wooden floor. Beneath the boards, something moved. Slow, deliberate, like it was crawling just inches away from her face. She jerked back. The lamp flickered. For a long time there was only silence. Then came a single soft tap from below. Emma clutched the blanket, eyes wide open. The tapping turned into a scrape, then faintly, impossibly, a whisper. Her name. Emma. Her stomach dropped. She stared at the floor, trembling. The voice was soft, almost childlike. She shook Daniel awake, tears welling in her eyes. "Daniel, someone's down there." He sat up, annoyed. "No one's under the floor, Emma. You're just—" He stopped mid-sentence. The boards beneath them let out a low, groaning creak, as if something heavy had just shifted beneath the bed. The light flickered once more, then went out completely. In the suffocating darkness, the whisper came again. Closer, clearer. "Emma, I'm here." Emma woke to the sound of her name being whispered again. Soft, deliberate, right beside her ear. But when she turned, Daniel was asleep, his breathing deep and steady. The room was dim, pale moonlight spilling through the curtains. For a moment, everything was still. Then the whisper came again, from beneath the floor. She froze. "Who's there?" Her voice was a shaky whisper swallowed by the darkness. The sound stopped, leaving only silence thick enough to make her heart pound louder. She slowly got out of bed and knelt on the cold wooden floor. When she pressed her ear against it, she could hear something. Faint, slow breathing, and then a small, childlike hum, almost like someone singing a lullaby beneath her feet. In the morning, Daniel found her sitting at the edge of the bed, pale and silent. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You didn't sleep again, did you?" She shook her head, whispering, "There's something down there." Daniel sighed, forcing a smile. "It's an old house, Em. Probably raccoons. I'll check it out later." He pulled back the rug to look and froze. Thin, jagged claw marks covered the wooden boards. Not scratches from an animal. These were deep, straight and long, like fingernails dragged with purpose. That night, Emma couldn't stop glancing at the floor. Every creak made her jump. Daniel tried to reassure her, reading in bed, pretending not to notice the fear in her eyes. But as the clock struck 2, the sound began again. This time, it wasn't scratching. It was breathing, steady, human, just below them. Emma gripped her phone, recording the sound. The floor vibrated softly with each breath. Her heart raced as she stopped the recording and played it back. At first, she heard the same sound. Then, buried within it, a voice. "Let me out." She dropped the phone, staring at Daniel in horror. He played the recording again, frowning. "That's just noise, Emma, interference or something." But even as he said it, his face had gone pale. The next morning, he covered the marks on the floor with a rug, pretending everything was fine. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time she passed the bedroom, she felt the faintest vibration beneath her feet, like something waiting. That night, as the wind howled outside, the floor suddenly thudded, once, then again, heavier each time. The boards swelled upward, bulging, as if something was pushing from below. Emma screamed Daniel's name. The light flickered violently, and then, in the brief silence that followed, the voice came again, this time louder, almost joyful. "Emma, I'm coming." The next morning, Daniel woke to the smell of damp air and the faint sound of water dripping. Emma was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floorboards like they might move again. Neither of them had slept. The bulge in the wood from the night before was still there, proof that it hadn't been a dream. Daniel finally decided to look for the source. In the hallway, behind a loose panel, he found something odd, a small square outline in the wall. A hidden door. It was sealed with old, rusted nails. The smell of mold hit them the moment he pried it open. A narrow staircase led down into darkness. "Maybe this leads to the basement," he muttered, though Emma could hear the unease in his voice. They descended slowly, their flashlight beam trembling against the wet stone walls. The air grew colder with each step, until their breaths fogged in front of them. At the bottom lay a basement that looked untouched for decades. Cobwebs hanging thick like curtains, the floor slick with dirt and dried leaves. In one corner sat a broken crib, its wood blackened with rot. Emma bent closer, her light revealing something painted on the wall behind it, small red handprints, smeared as if by a child. A faded lullaby tune box rested nearby, the same melody she'd heard whispering through the floor. Daniel swallowed hard. "It's probably from the family who used to live here." He found an old newspaper on a shelf, brittle and yellow with age. The headline read, "Local family vanishes. Only child found dead under floor." Emma's hands shook as she held the paper. "Daniel." "The floor," she whispered. He didn't respond. His flashlight caught something beneath the crib, scratch marks in the concrete, as if someone had clawed at it desperately. Then a soft humming filled the air, the same lullaby. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the music box. It echoed through the basement, drifting from the vents above them. Emma's breath hitched. "It's the same song. It's upstairs." The light flickered. Dust fell from the ceiling, a rhythmic tapping, almost like footsteps walking across the floor above them. They turned toward the stairs, but the door at the top slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Emma screamed, rushing to it, pounding with both fists. "Daniel, it won't open!" He tried too, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't move. From behind the door came a faint shuffle, then the slow dragging of something heavy across the floorboards. Emma pressed her ear to the door, trembling. From the other side, something whispered, the same soft, childlike voice. "Don't open it. He's still down there." Darkness swallowed them whole. The candle Daniel lit barely cut through the black, its flame trembling in the cold air. The basement was deathly silent now, too silent. Even their own breathing sounded wrong, too loud, too uneven. Then came the scratching, soft at first, from somewhere behind the walls, then circling them, closing in. Emma gripped Daniel's arm. "It's down here with us," she whispered. He shook his head, though his eyes darted toward the shadows. "It's just rats, Emma. Stay calm." But then a voice answered from the dark, low, rasping, and unmistakably human. "Not rats." The candle flickered violently. For a moment, Emma saw it. A pale shape crawling across the wall, limbs bent the wrong way, its head twisting toward her. The candle went out. The basement plunged into blackness. Emma screamed. Daniel fumbled for his phone light, his hands shaking. When the beam finally lit the room, the thing was gone. Only footprints remained, small, muddy, like those of a child, circling them in a perfect ring. "We need to leave," Emma cried, pulling at his arm. Daniel nodded, rushing to the stairs. The basement door above them rattled again. From behind it came the sound of nails dragging slowly against the wood, followed by a whisper. "Let me in." Daniel grabbed a crowbar from the shelf, his voice breaking. "I'm ending this. Whatever's under that floor, I'll tear it out." They forced the basement door open and stumbled back into the house. The boards creaked beneath their feet, alive with movement. The whispers came from everywhere now, layers of voices, crying, humming, calling their names. Daniel ran to the bedroom, prying at the floorboards with shaking hands. Emma begged him to stop, tears streaking her face. "Please don't. It wants you to open it." He didn't listen. With one final pull, the board cracked open. A rush of cold, foul air burst upward. Beneath, in the dirt, lay the remains of a small skeleton clutching an old photograph. A woman's face, nearly identical to Emma's. Daniel froze. The air turned icy. Something grabbed his wrist from below. He screamed, dropping the crowbar. The boards around the hole splintered and folded inward, as if the floor itself was swallowing him whole. Emma tried to hold on, but his hand slipped from hers, vanishing into the darkness. The boards slammed shut. Silence returned. Hours later, rescuers found Emma kneeling on the bedroom floor, shaking and covered in dust. The boards were freshly nailed down from the inside. As they carried her away, one officer lingered, hearing a faint sound beneath the floor. A whisper. "Now there's room for one more." Rain hammered against the metal roof of the depot, echoing through the dim, empty parking bays. The last bus of the night hissed to a stop, its headlights cutting through the drizzle like tired eyes. Adil wiped the fog off the farebox and exhaled, watching his own breath cloud in front of him. It was his first week on the night shift, Route 13, the quietest run in the city. Rashid, the old driver with deep lines across his face, leaned against the wheel and muttered, "Never liked the last route. Strange things happen after midnight." Adil smiled, pretending not to notice the tremor in his voice. "Strange like what?" he asked, but Rashid only shrugged. "You'll see if you stay long enough." By 11:45, the streets had gone silent. Neon signs blinked weakly in the rain. One passenger got off. No one else boarded. The air inside grew colder, the engine hum turning hollow, like it was echoing through an empty tunnel. Then, at the final stop before the depot, the bus slowed. Through the misted glass, Adil saw a figure standing under a flickering streetlight. An old man in a grey coat, head bowed, water dripping from his hat. He raised his arm stiffly, signaling the bus. Adil pressed the bell and opened the door. The man climbed aboard without a word. His shoes left wet footprints that faded almost instantly. He didn't look up, didn't meet Adil's eyes, just reached into his pocket and placed a few coins on the tray. They were black, scorched-looking, and strangely cold to touch. "Sir, ticket for where?" Adil asked. Silence. The man walked to the back and sat down, face hidden in shadow. For the rest of the route, Adil kept glancing in the mirror. The man never moved. The sound of the rain softened until only the creak of the bus filled the space. Rashid seemed uneasy too, muttering prayers under his breath. When they reached the depot, Adil turned to remind the passenger to get off. The seat was empty. The bus door hadn't opened. Only the faint smell of smoke hung in the air. He frowned, stepped to the back, and froze. The seat cushion was wet, but not from rain. It smelled like burnt rubber. On the floor beneath it lay the same coins, still there, dark and cold, faintly steaming in the chill air. As he picked them up, the bus lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the reflection of the farebox glass, for a heartbeat, Adil thought he saw someone sitting behind him, just a shape, grey and still, before the lights blinked back on, and he was alone again. The next morning, sunlight slipped weakly through Adil's curtains, but the cold still clung to him like a shadow from last night. He sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the coins he'd taken from the farebox. They lay on a tissue, blackened, edges warped, as if touched by fire. His wife, Sana, poured him tea and frowned. "Why are you staring at them like that?" Adil forced a laugh. "Just some old coins someone paid with, probably dirty. She picked one up, turning it over. "It's not dirt," she murmured. "It feels wrong." He reached for it, and when their fingers brushed, a sharp, static jolt ran through both of them. Sana gasped and dropped the coin. It landed with a dull clink, spinning for too long before stopping flat, perfectly still, as if pinned by something unseen. That night, Adil sat alone in the living room. The coins were on the table in front of him. The rain had stopped, but the wind outside howled through the narrow alley like distant whispers. He closed his eyes for a moment and heard a faint metallic sound. Clink, then again. Clink. He looked up. The coins weren't where he left them. They were arranged now in a perfect circle on the table, edges touching. His stomach tightened. "Sana?" he called, voice trembling. No answer. He grabbed the coins with shaking hands, wrapped them in paper, and shoved them into his bag. At the depot, Rashid was checking the tires when Adil approached him. These coins," Adil said quietly, showing him the blackened metal. Rashid's face drained of color. "You took them home?" he asked sharply. Adil nodded. Rashid took a step back, eyes darting to the bus as if afraid it could hear them. "Don't ever do that again," he whispered. A conductor years ago did the same. He started hearing things too. They found his bus empty, engine running, doors locked from the inside. Adil forced a smile. "You're just trying to scare me." Rashid didn't reply. He pointed to the CCTV booth. "Then watch last night's recording yourself." Adil hesitated but followed. The grainy footage played. He saw himself walking down the aisle, speaking to the passenger, but the back seat was empty. His hand extended into thin air. He watched, frozen, as the Adil on screen turned toward the camera, pale and trembling. And behind him, for only 1 second, a shadowed figure appeared in the reflection of the window, sitting exactly where the old man had been. The video glitched, then cut to static. In the silence that followed, Adil realized the faint metallic clinking had started again. But this time, it was coming from his own pocket. Fog rolled over the city that night like a slow-moving tide, swallowing the streets in silence. Adil stood beside the bus, staring at the faded number painted on its side. Route 13. His hands trembled slightly as he clipped the fare machine to his belt. Rashid noticed. "You don't have to do this run," the driver muttered. "Take the early shift tomorrow." Adil shook his head. "If I skip now, I'll never get back on." His voice was steady, but his heart was not. The bus doors hissed open. The smell of diesel and something faintly metallic filled the air. They drove through the sleeping city. Empty stops, shuttered shops, the glow of distant lamps swallowed by fog. At exactly the same spot as before, the bus slowed. A silhouette waited beneath the same flickering streetlight. The old man in the grey coat. His posture hadn't changed, his hat dripping steadily. Adil's throat went dry. Rashid sighed, unaware of the true weight in the air. "Looks like we got one last passenger." The door opened with a creak. The old man climbed aboard in silence, head still bowed. Adil's hand hovered over the fare box, afraid to look up. The man's fingers appeared, thin, ash-colored, dropping the same blackened coins onto the tray. This time, a faint whisper followed. "You collect the fare, not the soul." Adil froze. "What did you say?" No response. The man walked to the back and sat down, same as before. Rashid frowned in the mirror. "Who are you talking to?" "The passenger," Adil said. "There's no one there," Rashid replied, his voice uneasy. Adil turned toward the back. The old man was still visible, or at least Adil thought he was. The air shimmered faintly around him like heat over asphalt. The faint scent of smoke drifted through the aisle. Adil's vision blurred, his ears rang, he blinked hard, and for a moment the road outside disappeared. There was only fog, endless and white. He clutched the seat handle, whispering a prayer under his breath. The bus lurched forward, emerging suddenly from the mist. The passengers, few as they were, stared at him, confused and pale. Rashid didn't say another word for the rest of the ride. When they reached the depot, Adil looked down at the coins in the tray. They were still hot, and on the surface of one, freshly burnt into the metal, was a single word in faint, crooked letters. Adil. He dropped it instantly, but the mark didn't fade. The bus lights flickered. Somewhere near the back seat, a low whisper drifted through the silence. Slow, rasping, almost kind. The next morning, Adil stormed into the depot, his eyes red from another sleepless night. He went straight to the office, demanding to see the route records. The supervisor, a plump man with a forced smile, looked up from his desk. "Ledger for Route 13? It's not available," he said too quickly. "Not available?" Adil's voice cracked. "Every route has a log. Drivers, collectors, incidents, everything." The man shifted in his chair. "It must have been misplaced years ago. Try the archives." Adil left before he could finish. He knew the tone, that careful, fearful tone of someone avoiding truth. The archives were in a dusty back room, smelling of rust and damp paper. He flipped through piles of old logs, fingers trembling, until he found what he was looking for. Route 13, 1985. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. Bus 47C, fire reported near. The rest was gone, the page half burnt. Later that evening, he tracked down an address scribbled in pencil at the bottom of the page. Nasir Ahmed, retired conductor. The old man lived in a narrow street behind the old bus terminal. He opened the door slowly, his eyes milky with age but sharp with recognition. "You're from Route 13, Nasir said before Adil could speak. "I can smell the smoke." Adil. Adil's breath caught. "Who is he?" "The man in the grey coat." Nasir hesitated, looking past Adil as if expecting someone else to be there. "That bus burned 30 years ago. Engine caught fire on the bridge. The conductor tried to collect fares till the end. He wouldn't leave without finishing his route." His voice shook. "They found his coins melted into the floor. And one passenger, never identified." Adil felt his knees weaken. "You're saying—" "I'm saying the dead remember duty better than the living," Nasir interrupted. "When he gives you coins, it means he's choosing you to keep the route going." Adil stared at his hands. The faint burn marks had darkened overnight, like something spreading under the skin. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Can it be stopped?" Nasir shook his head. "Once you take his fare, the path begins. He doesn't haunt the route. He is the route." Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Adil stepped into the rain, every drop stinging like ash. He turned back once, but Nasir had already shut the door. Through the window, Adil could see the old man praying quietly, hands trembling. As he reached the main road, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number blinked on the screen. "When he pays you the last time, it's your turn to collect." The message disappeared before his eyes, leaving the screen blank and the faint smell of smoke rising from his pocket.